What is the European Union? You would say a force that binds European countries. We would say it is one of the most successful liberal experiments in recent history. What do we mean by it? Stay tuned to find out. Hello and welcome to TFI Global, the foreign affairs and geopolitics analysis arm of TFI Media Group. I'm your host Akanksha. Let us begin. When World War II ended, Europeans had one common goal of rushing to join the West. The fall of the USSR further bolstered the movement. In fact, it's arguable that becoming indistinguishably Western was the main goal of the revolutions of 1989. Liberal ideas such as individual opportunity, freedom of movement and of assembly, immunity from punishment for criticism, access to justice, and responsiveness of the government to popular demands were typically linked with liberalism in the early years following 1989. At first, the eager imitation of Western models along with the removal of Soviet forces from Europe was perceived as a form of liberation. Further, France, Germany and UK were at the core of European Union. These imperial forces have relied on complex political and institutional frameworks to perceive the imperial inequities. These forces were what we call hegemens of the continent. They made sure that non-hegemonic member states must be governed by elites who view the European Union with its unique structures and values as a role model for their own nation to imitate. And these elites must be supported to organize their internal social, political and economic order in a way that is compatible with the interest of the hegemons in maintaining its empire. The hegemons will support them in maintaining their position of authority by giving them the ideological, financial and military tools they need to fend off opposition. But maintaining such elites in power may come at a cost in terms of democratic values, economic resources and even human lives. Further, the symbiotic relationship between Germany and France, when both countries have assisted in having leaders of their choice in the others, is also seeing demise. But the Eurozone crisis of 2009 has had a particularly damaging effect on the EU as it has caused a number of member countries to struggle with budget deficit and high unemployment. By 2010, rising socio-economic inequality, rampant corruption and the morally arbitrary shift of the public property into the hands of a smaller number of people had permanently tarnished the European idea of liberalism. In the second decade of the 21st century, the drawbacks of this imitation-based politics became too clear to ignore. The EU is now facing a crisis as several of its member countries have threatened to leave the Union. This is in response to the increasing pressures of globalization, the influx of refugees, and the economic and political instability that has come with them. The United Kingdom's decision to leave the EU, known as Brexit, in 2020 was a major shock to the system and has caused a great deal of uncertainty. The EU's open borders and free movement of people has created a number of economic and cultural tensions, particularly in the wake of the recent refugee crisis. This has been compounded by the fact that decision-making powers have been concentrated among hegemons in Brussels rather than shared among the member countries. The failure of the EU to effectively manage the challenges posed by globalization has led to a rise in nationalism and populism in many countries. This has been particularly evident in the United Kingdom, where Brexit was largely driven by a desire to reassert national sovereignty. In other countries such as Italy, Hungary and Poland, the rise of populist politicians has led to a further erosion of support for the EU. Populist governments have always been underlined as dictatorships who impede democratic institutions. The EU became a tool for hegemons to maintain their status quo. It has resulted in a crisis of confidence in the EU and a growing sense of alienation among its citizens. EU is now in danger of coming apart as more and more countries threaten to leave the Union. The receding tide of populism will put an end to the successful liberal experiment.